All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to take a deep dive into this interview with Patrick Bet-David.
Okay.
And it was on the Iced Coffee Hour YouTube channel. I think most folks know who Bet-David is.
Oh, yeah.
Entrepreneur, media personality.
Yeah, big personality.
Big personality, lots of interesting takes and predictions and stuff like that.
Right.
I think the thing that makes him stand out, though, and why we're covering this is he's got a very unique perspective.
Yeah.
Right? He was a refugee from Iran
Mm-hmm.
and built a multi-million-dollar empire.
Definitely not the typical talking head you see on cable news.
No, definitely not. So let's jump right in.
All right.
One of the things that kind of caught our eye, he's talking about the future of presidential debates. And I think that's something that a lot of people are thinking about, like, how are they going to evolve,
Yeah.
with the rise of social media and everything like that? Are they even going to be on TV anymore?
Right. Exactly.
So he predicts that by 2027, 2028, they'll be on podcasts, not TV. That's a bold prediction.
It is. I guess we're seeing a shift in how people consume information.
Sure.
But, to say that televised debates are going to completely disappear,
Yeah.
I don't know about that. They're still a major event.
Do you think the networks are going to let that go that easily?
Probably not. But Bet-David makes a good point about podcasts.
Yeah.
He talks about Joe Rogan's interview with Trump. It was over 3 hours long.
Crazy.
Yeah, so much more time for in-depth discussion.
I mean, you can really get into the weeds.
Exactly. You get a different kind of connection with the guests.
I mean, the televised debates are so controlled.
Very tightly formatted, limited time for responses.
You just get sound bites.
Exactly. And I think that's what Bet-David is getting at.
Yeah.
Podcasts allow for a more authentic, unfiltered conversation.
You think that's better for voters, though?
Well, it's interesting to think about. On the one hand, you get more depth.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, how many people are really going to sit through a 3-hour podcast?
Right. Accessibility is a big issue. I mean, not everyone has the time or even the access to podcasts.
Exactly. It's something to keep an eye on for sure.
Definitely. Now, the interview also gave us a little peek behind the curtain
Oh, yeah.
when it comes to hosting a guest like Donald Trump.
I bet that was quite an experience.
Oh, yeah. Bet-David shared some pretty wild stories about the Secret Service.
Yo kidding.
Like, they basically took over his office.
Oh, wow.
They moved his staff, equipment. Even his family had to be escorted out.
Seriously?
Yeah, for safety reasons.
I know it's a former president, but that's intense.
And he said they took over the control room, too.
Wow. So he had no control over the technical aspect.
Nope, they were in charge.
That's wild.
And the craziest part, he couldn't tell anyone.
Not even his wife.
Not even his wife until the day before.
I bet that was tough.
Yeah, he had to keep it completely under wraps.
Can't imagine the pressure.
So Bet-David doesn't shy away from controversial topics either.
No, he definitely doesn't.
He jumps right into, who really holds the power
Okay, this should be interesting.
in the U.S. government. And he suggests it's not always who you think.
Oh, so he's going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, a little bit. He even brings up an anecdote
Oh.
from George H.W. Bush's funeral.
Oh, okay.
So all these big names are there, right? The Clintons, the Obamas,
Mhm.
and they're all handed this mysterious white envelope.
A white envelope. What was in it?
He doesn't say, he just uses it to fuel this whole theory.
So classic conspiracy theory stuff.
Basically, yeah.
But it does make you wonder.
It does, and he even mentions talking to Congressman Jim Jordan about it,
Okay, yeah.
who said he'd never seen anything like that before.
That adds a little intrigue.
Right. Like, is there something more to this envelope?
Who knows, but it's a good story.
Right. Now, another bold prediction from Bet-David.
Okay, hit me with it.
He says J.D. Vance is going to be a major political force.
Really?
Yeah, he thinks he's got the charisma, the media savvy.
Interesting.
He even compares him to Kamala Harris,
Oh, wow.
saying Vance is way more compelling and relatable.
That's a pretty strong statement.
It is. He thinks Vance could have a 12-year run.
12 years. That's a long time in politics.
I know, right? He even throws out a potential presidential bid in 2028.
Wow, that's a long way off.
It is, but it's interesting to think about.
Definitely. Vance is a rising star, no doubt.
Yeah.
But 2028,
Oh,
a lot can happen between now and then.
for sure. Okay, ready for another bold idea?
Lay it on me.
Zero income tax.
Zero. Like no income tax at all.
Exactly, that's what he's proposing.
Wow, that's quite a departure from what we have now.
Yeah, it's definitely radical, but he goes into detail.
Like, how would that even work?
So he talks about cutting government spending big time.
Where would those cuts come from?
Defense, for one. Also entitlement programs.
Social Security.
Yeah, potentially even tariffs.
Those are some pretty big changes.
They are, and he acknowledges that it would take a long time to implement, like 20 years or more.
That's a generational shift.
Yeah, and he brings up a key point.
Which is?
You'd need consistent political philosophy.
Ah, that's the catch.
Yeah, for a really long time, and that's basically impossible in American politics.
It is. We flip-flop every few years.
Exactly, so it's an interesting idea.
Very interesting, but probably not realistic?
Probably not, and then he talks about the entitlement issue.
Right. A lot of Americans rely on those programs.
He suggests, and this is pretty controversial,
Okay.
paying out what people have contributed to Social Security.
In a lump sum.
Yeah, and basically shutting it down.
Wow, that would be huge.
Yeah, I can't imagine that going over well.
No, not at all. Especially with seniors who depend on it.
Right, so very bold ideas.
Definitely thought-provoking for sure.
And then, of course, he sprinkles in these details about his own businesses, his personal life.
Of course, got to keep it entertaining.
Right, so he talks about owning a piece of the New York Yankees.
No way, seriously.
Yeah, a minority stake, but still.
That's pretty cool.
And he was surprised by how good the ROI was.
Makes sense. The Yankees are a global brand.
Yeah, and then he shares the story about buying this 11-acre property for his businesses. He's got big plans.
I bet 11 acres is a lot of space.
It is, and then there's his app. Man.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's growing like crazy.
What's his vision for the app?
He wants it to be this platform for connecting people, sharing knowledge, all that.
Kind of like a modern-day salon.
Yeah, something like that. Very forward-thinking.
Sounds like it.
Okay, so let's talk about his views on traditional media.
Okay, I'm curious to hear what he has to say.
So he basically thinks it's on the decline.
Like newspapers and cable news.
Yeah, he thinks it's losing relevance.
Because of?
The rise of independent content creators.
People like him?
Yeah, people who are using podcasts, YouTube.
To bypass the gatekeepers?
Exactly. He even predicts that networks like CNN
Oh, wow.
are going to disappear.
He thinks they're going to go away completely.
Yeah, he thinks they're too reliant on baby boomers.
Interesting. So he's saying they're not connecting with younger audiences.
Exactly.
It's a bold prediction.
It is, but it's something to think about.
Definitely. The media landscape is changing.
Right, and he's critical of traditional media for a few reasons.
Like what?
He thinks they lack accountability.
In what way?
Well, he points to the use of anonymous sources.
Okay, yeah, that can be problematic.
And he thinks they sensationalize stories.
To get clicks and views.
Exactly, and he contrasts that with independent creators who he says are more transparent, more willing to engage in open dialogue.
So he sees them as more authentic.
Yeah, basically.
It's an interesting perspective.
It is. It challenges us to think about how the media is evolving, what it means for journalism, for political discourse.
Absolutely. It's a conversation we need to be having.
Okay, now let's get into something that's been getting a lot of attention. This idea that right-leaning folks are more open to podcasting than left-leaning folks.
That's an interesting observation.
Right, so Bet David has this theory.
Okay.
And it's basically that people on the left, they have less incentive to participate. Because they already have access to mainstream media that aligns with their views.
Oh, I see. So he's saying they don't need podcasts.
Yeah, they've already got a platform.
It's an interesting theory.
Right, like they don't need to go out and create their own thing.
So what about the right?
He thinks they're more drawn to podcasting because they feel like they're not being represented in traditional media.
So they're seeking out alternative outlets.
Exactly, and he even flips the script.
How so?
He imagines a world where podcasting was the dominant format.
Okay.
And cable news was the newcomer.
Interesting.
And he says in that world, left-leaning folks would be less likely to embrace cable news because they wouldn't have the same level of control.
Ah, so it's about control.
Yeah, he thinks they're used to the pre-approved questions, the friendly environment of podcasting.
So he's saying they wouldn't be comfortable with the more adversarial nature of cable news.
Exactly. It's a thought experiment.
It is, and it raises some interesting questions.
Right. Like, how does the media format influence political discourse?
Exactly. It's something to consider.
And he even shares a personal anecdote about this perceived bias in media.
Oh.
So he did an interview with a big magazine.
Right.
And it was for an article about someone he knows.
Sure.
And he says he was very clear with the reporter.
About what?
That he wanted the conversation accurately represented.
Makes sense.
And he told them if they misrepresented him, it would hurt his relationship with this person.
So he was setting boundaries.
Exactly. And it shows that he's very aware of how the media can twist things, how they can create a narrative.
Especially in today's world where everything is amplified online.
Right. And he even compares it to Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan, the basketball player.
Yeah, how Jordan was very protective of his family.
Keeping them out of the spotlight.
Exactly. And Bette David says he learned from that.
To control his own narrative.
Yeah, to be careful about what he says, how he says it.
It's a smart strategy.
Especially for someone like him.
Right. He's got strong opinions. He's not afraid to say what he thinks.
And that can lead to controversy.
Absolutely. So controlling your narrative is crucial.
Now, speaking of controversy, he also talks about his decision to sign Chris Cuomo to his show.
Chris Cuomo, the former CNN anchor.
The one and only.
Wow, that was a bold move.
It was, and he got a lot of backlash for it.
I can imagine.
But he defended his choice.
How so?
He talked about the importance of open dialogue, the clash of ideas, even if they're controversial.
So he's not afraid of a little debate.
Not at all. He even said he got messages from some big names, people he knows and respects.
And they were.
Disappointed in him for hiring Cuomo.
Wow, that must have been tough.
Yeah, but he stuck to his guns.
It shows he's willing to stand by his convictions.
Even when it's unpopular.
That's admirable.
And he even compared it to raising his kids.
How so?
He said he wants to expose them to different perspectives.
Teach them how to think critically.
Yeah, and how to handle criticism.
That's important.
It is, and it shows that he's thinking about the bigger picture.
It's not just about him, it's about the next generation.
Exactly.
That's a refreshing perspective.
Okay, so before we move on,
Yeah.
I just want to highlight a couple of stories he shared
that
I think really illustrate his approach to business.
All right.
So he talks about hiring a forensic accountant.
To do what?
To audit his company's expenses.
Interesting.
And they uncovered some fraud.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he ended up firing several employees.
That's a tough decision.
It is, but it shows that he's serious about ethical business practices.
Absolutely. He's not going to tolerate that kind of behavior.
And then he shares another story about an employee at his insurance company.
Who was selling policies without a license?
Oh, that's illegal.
Yeah, major violation.
What happened?
He fired the employee, reported them to the Department of Insurance.
Wow, he didn't mess around.
Nope, he's all about compliance, accountability.
You can tell he takes his business seriously.
Absolutely. And those stories just show that he's got high standards, a strong moral compass.
I think that's what resonates with his audience.
Yeah, they see him as someone who's authentic, who's not afraid to do the right thing.
Even when it's hard.
Exactly.
He's a fascinating guy, that's for sure.
He is. All right, well, we're going to take a little break here.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll dive into Bette David's insights on vulnerability, his personal investment strategies, and his surprising connection to the world of collectible trading cards.
Looking forward to it.
All right. See you in a bit.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We're going to continue our deep dive into Bette David's interview on the Iced Coffee Hour. Before we took a break, we were looking at, his thoughts on media, politics, business. Now, let's kind of shift gears a little bit and get a little more personal.
Okay.
He actually got pretty candid about vulnerability and emotions.
Which is interesting. You don't always see that from successful entrepreneurs, especially ones in the public eye.
No, you don't. I thought his response to that question about, when is it okay for men to show emotion was interesting.
What did he say?
Well, he kind of deflected a little bit, said his wife Jennifer could probably speak to that better than him.
Smart move.
And he even plugged her profile on his app. Man.
Of course. Always the businessman.
Always working. But he did share that he doesn't cry very often. But he did mention a couple instances where he was really moved.
Like what?
Well, he talked about the passing of his friend Jim Page.
Oh, yeah.
Said he didn't cry at the funeral, but then months later, it just hit him.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. Grief doesn't always hit you right away.
No, it can be delayed, unexpected.
He also mentioned getting emotional in a recent interview with Lewis Howes.
Oh, yeah. What was that about?
When Howes asked him about the possibility of losing everything.
It's kind of surprising to hear that from someone like Bette David.
Right. He always seems so confident, so successful.
But I think those moments of vulnerability, they make him more human, more relatable.
Definitely. It shows he's not just this, larger-than-life figure.
Right. He's got real feelings, real struggles.
Now, there was a question that Bette David got asked that's been making the rounds online.
Oh, yeah. The one about ranking his mom, daughter, and wife.
Yeah, who would he save? Who would he prioritize?
Such a tough question. And Bette David even pointed out that it's rooted in cultural values, perspectives.
He's right. Different cultures have different ideas about family, about duty.
He mentioned that, like, in Hispanic culture, there's often an emphasis on saving the mother, while in American culture, it's more common to prioritize the wife.
Fascinating how those cultural norms play out.
And for Bet David personally,
Yeah.
he said he would save his daughter.
Because she's young. She has her whole life ahead of her.
Exactly. And he said he's had a good life, no regrets.
It's a powerful statement.
It is. Very selfless, very accepting.
All right, so let's get back to Bet David, the businessman.
Okay.
You mentioned he shared some details about his investment strategies.
He did, and some of them are pretty unconventional.
Like what?
Well, he talked about this recent purchase, an 11-acre property.
11 acres, that's huge. What's he planning to do with it?
He's going to build 3 massive buildings, like 100,000 square feet each.
Seriously. What for?
For his employees, he wants to have around 2,000 people working there.
Wow, that's a big vision.
It is, and he paid cash for the property.
Dash. How much are we talking?
$25.2 million.
That's a lot of cash.
It is, and he had to wire the money within a week.
That's a quick turnaround.
Yeah, no time to waste.
He also talked about his consulting firm.
Oh, yeah, it's growing really fast.
What kind of consulting do they do?
They focus on 5 key areas: sales, marketing, leadership, finance, and operations.
Okay, pretty broad.
They have what they call the 5x5 rule.
5 by 5, what's that?
So within each of those areas, they have 5 core principles.
I see, so it's like a framework for success.
Exactly, and he emphasized that it's all based on real-world experience.
Not just theory.
Nope, they've been there, done that.
And what about his app, man?
Oh yeah, he's very bullish on that.
He sees it as a game changer.
He does. He described it as a combination of like Duolingo, GLG, Cameo, LinkedIn, even WhatsApp.
Wow, that's a lot of different platforms rolled into one.
It is. He's trying to create something really unique.
And how's it doing?
The numbers are impressive. The number of completed mans.
Completed mans.
That's what they call interactions or sessions on the app.
Okay.
It's growing exponentially year over year.
So people are using it.
They are. And it shows that there's a demand for this kind of personalized connection, this knowledge sharing.
It's tapping into something.
It is. Now let's talk about his personal investment portfolio.
Okay, this should be interesting.
So he's got a pretty diverse range of assets.
Like what?
Real estate, stocks, cryptocurrency, even collectible trading cards.
Trading cards, that's unexpected.
Yeah, he's got like $1 to $5 million in those.
He sees them as an investment.
He does. He thinks they're undervalued.
Okay.
He even shared a story about trying to buy a rare Mickey Mantle card.
For how much?
He offered $19 million.
$19 million for a baseball card.
Yeah, but the offer was rejected.
Wow, that's serious money.
It is, but it shows how passionate he is about this niche.
And what about his real estate holdings?
He's got a lot of commercial real estate, somewhere between $50 and $60 million worth.
That's a lot of property.
Yeah, and his own home is valued at around $40 million.
Wow, that's a nice house.
It is. And then he's also got some cryptocurrency.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he's got a couple million in Bitcoin, a little less in Ethereum.
So he's dipping his toes in the crypto waters.
He is, but he's not going all in.
Smart move. It's a volatile market.
And of course, we can't forget about his stake in the New York Yankees.
Right, he's a minority owner.
He is, and he's really happy with the ROI.
Makes sense. The Yankees are a legendary franchise.
He even said he's thinking about becoming a majority owner someday.
Of the Yankees?
Not necessarily the Yankees, but some sports team.
That's a big goal.
It is, but it's not out of reach for someone like Bet David.
He's definitely ambitious.
Now, one of the questions that came up in the interview was about where Bet David sees the biggest opportunities in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, what did he say?
And he gave some really practical advice.
Like what?
He emphasized the importance of self-assessment.
Knowing your strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. He talked about different personality types.
And how they might be suited for different careers.
Right, like someone who's organized, analytical, they might make a good financial advisor.
It's about finding the right fit.
It is. And he also stressed the importance of mentors.
Learning from people who have been successful.
He shared a story about Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart.
Oh, yeah. What about him?
How Walton spent a whole day with a group of visitors from Brazil.
Doing what?
Asking them questions about their business.
Even though he was already incredibly successful.
Exactly. He was always learning.
It shows you never stop learning.
Never. And then Bet David threw out some hypothetical scenarios.
Like what?
One was about an employee who's cheating the company but making a lot of money.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Right. What do you do?
It's an ethical dilemma.
It is. And I think those scenarios They highlight the complexity of decision-making.
A fact that there's not always a clear right or wrong answer.
And now for something a little different.
Okay.
Let's talk about truth and accountability in the age of social media.
That's a big topic.
It is, and Bet David has some strong opinions about it.
Like what?
Well, he argues that the rise of anonymous sources
Good.
and the decline of journalistic integrity, they've eroded public trust in traditional media.
You got a point there.
Right, and he even shared a personal story about someone spreading false rumors about him using steroids.
Wow, that's awful.
It is, and it shows how easy it is for misinformation to spread online.
And how damaging it can be.
Exactly, and he's concerned about the lack of accountability.
For people who spread lies.
Right, he thinks the legal system makes it hard to hold them responsible.
It's a complicated issue.
It is, but it's something we need to address.
Absolutely. We need to find a way to balance free speech with protecting people from harm.
Okay, so shifting gears again.
Right.
Bet David had some final thoughts about the future of media and politics.
Okay, what did he say?
He sees a future where the political landscape becomes even more polarized.
Even more than it is now?
He thinks so. He sees the upcoming election as a pivotal moment.
Like a turning point.
Exactly, and he predicts that if Trump wins, J.D. Vance is going to become a target for the establishment.
Because they see him as a threat.
Yeah, they see him as a rising star with the potential to disrupt the power dynamics.
Interesting.
And Bet David even thinks the media will try to pit Trump and Vance against each other.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly.
He also talked about the rise of figures like Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson.
Oh, yeah, people who are challenging the status quo.
And appealing to a certain segment of the population.
Right, people who are disillusioned with the traditional parties, the traditional media.
He thinks they've tapped into a vein of discontent.
He does, and he thinks it's especially strong among young men.
Interesting.
He attributes this in part to the policies implemented during the pandemic.
Okay.
He thinks those policies had a big impact on young people.
Disrupting their education, their social lives, their economic prospects.
Exactly. And he thinks that's led to a sense of resentment, a desire for change.
The fascinating analysis.
It is. And it makes you wonder, what's going to happen next? What does the future hold?
It's both exciting and a little scary.
It is, but I think Bet David's message is ultimately one of empowerment.
How so?
He's saying that we have the power to shape our own destinies.
You're not just passive observers.
Exactly. We can choose to be active participants.
In creating the future we want.
Exactly. And I think that's a powerful message.
It is. It's a call to action.
All right. Welcome back to our deep dive into Patrick Bet David's interview on the Iced Coffee Hour. You know, we've covered a lot of ground already. His thoughts on media, politics, business. We even touched on, some more personal stuff like vulnerability and accountability.
Right. It's been a wide-ranging conversation.
It has. But, as we wrap things up, I want to circle back to Bet David's thoughts on the future, specifically the future of America.
Okay. He's always got some interesting predictions.
He does. And he sees a lot of potential for, I guess you could say, turmoil.
Turmoil? Like, what does he mean?
Well, he thinks the political landscape is going to become even more divided.
More than it is now. I mean, it's pretty bad already.
I know, right? But he thinks it's going to get worse.
And what's driving that, in his view?
Well, he talks about the upcoming election being kind of a defining moment.
Okay, a turning point.
Yeah, whatever happens is going to have ripple effects for years to come.
And he specifically mentioned, if I recall correctly, that if Trump wins...
Yeah, he thinks J.D. Vance is going to be a major target.
A target?
From who?
The establishment, the powers that be.
Because they see Vance as a threat.
Exactly. They see him as, this rising star, someone who could disrupt the existing power structure.
Interesting.
And Bet David even thinks the media is going to try to pit Trump and Vance against each other.
Oh, classic divide and conquer.
Exactly. Create some infighting.
Yeah.
Weaken their alliance.
It wouldn't be the first time we've seen that kind of tactic in politics.
Nope, not at all. And he also talked about the growing influence of people like Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson, people who are, I guess you could say, outside the mainstream.
Yeah, they're challenging the status quo.
And appealing to a certain segment of the population.
Right. People who are disillusioned with the traditional parties, the traditional media.
He thinks they've tapped into something, a real sense of discontent.
He does, and he thinks it's especially strong among young men.
Interesting.
He attributes that in part to the policies that were put in place during the pandemic.
Okay, how so?
Well, he thinks those policies had a disproportionate impact on young people.
Disrupting their education, their social lives, their economic opportunities.
Exactly. And he thinks that's left a lasting impression.
A sense of resentment, maybe?
Yeah.
And a desire for something different.
It's a fascinating analysis.
It is. And, it makes you think about what the future holds.
Yeah. It's a lot to process.
It is. But, one thing that struck me about that David's perspective is it's not all doom and gloom.
No.
No, I think there's also a sense of optimism, of empowerment.
Empowerment. How so?
Well, he's basically saying that we have the power to shape our own destinies.
We're not just victims of circumstance.
Exactly. We can choose to be proactive, to create the future we want.
I like that. It's a message of hope.
It is. And, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think that's something for all of us to think about.
Absolutely. It's a call to action.
It is. So, regardless of your political beliefs, your background, the message is get involved, make your voice heard, shape the future you want to see.
And be an independent thinker.
Exactly. Question everything. Don't just accept what you're told.
Do your own research. Form your own conclusions.
And never stop learning.
The world is changing so fast, we got to keep up.
We do. And, as we say every week, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.